and guess what it was like, because in September I started showing interest in Vanya. I asked about the brother. I was told, oh, we can separate them. I wasn't asking for them to be separated. I was just looking for information. We didn't know how severe the special needs were and if it was something we could take on. Anyways, we were very shortly thereafter told, oh, they moved Jan to Vanya's orphanage. So instead of separating the boys, they brought the boys together, which is great. I mean, that was wonderful, but we still had no idea what kind of special needs he had. So that was in September of 2021. So it's been almost 2 years. And I was told about a year ago that when Jan came to the orphanage, the new orphanage, he could barely walk and was stumbling all over the place. So at the time he was 7. He didn't talk. Now, whether that means he babbled and didn't speak words or he didn't speak at all, I'm not sure. And they really didn't expect much out of him. So we fought for Jan to come for winter hosting when Vanya came, and they told us no, we're not sending him. So we weren't sure why, we weren't really given a reason why, but after we hosted Vanya that winter, and my husband looked at me one day and he said, how do we not give this kid parents too? I started advocating to have Jan come for summer hosting last year, and we got an agreement that we were gonna have to jump through hoops. A teacher was gonna come and stay with us. If she felt like she could leave him, she would leave him, and if she felt like she couldn't, she'd take him back. If he stayed with us at the end of the summer, I would have to bring him back all the way to the orphanage in Ukraine. I'd have to travel back all the way with him. And we said, whatever, we'll jump through hoops. We wanna know what this kid's needs are. We wanna meet him. We want him in our home. And so we got the agreement. I was very excited, and within days the war broke out. Hosting was canceled, and we all know the story of what led us here today. I was lucky enough to go, my boys are in Poland, and I was lucky enough to go and see them end of April last year and stay there for a few weeks, and I met Jan. At that time, Jan was riding a scooter, riding a balance bike. He's about the size of a 2-year-old. He comes just short of my waist, even though he's 9. And he was, all over the place, running, jumping. He sings and talks constantly. I don't know what he's saying, but he sings and talks constantly. I went back in November and was told that that's when the director started talking about how Jan, they didn't think that really anything would become of Jan, and they were shocked at the fact that he can walk and he can talk, and look at him now, who knows what he could be. I have no idea what his cognitive level is, but I know that he's not getting what he needs there. None of the kids are, but with kids with special needs, it's even more so. We have so much to offer here in the States, so many services that are covered, and there's just so much that could help him thrive. So I look at my boys, and of course both of them need to be here. They both need loving stability, or loving family stability, to know that they have parents and a family. They need all of those things, all the kids do. But I guess, I was asked to kind of speak more on the special needs side of things. And I look at Jan, and he's a kid that potentially could live a fairly normal life if given the chance. There's a lot of potential there, untapped potential, and we don't even know what it is. And we don't even know how far it could go. And every day that he spends there, he's getting pushed further and further behind, as all the kids are, but especially when you're talking about a special needs child who really could use the services to get further ahead. Every day lost is another day that he's being pushed behind and being delayed even further. So where they are, the other thing that I just was gonna touch on is with Jan, like I said, he's tiny. I don't know what his cognitive ability is, but where our kids are, they're near a lake. And several times while I was there, Jan would be running down to the lake and no one was watching him. I'd be walking up, just getting there during the day, and he's running down to the lake, beelining it, and there's no one around. And this little kid could very easily, does not know how to swim, could very easily just run in the lake. The kid's fearless. So just general supervision issues they're an issue everywhere. But that was one of the very concerning things to me at this location, is they're literally on a peninsula surrounded by a lake, and most of the kids don't know how to swim. I mean, there are life jackets available, a limited amount, but you're looking at a bunch of kids who want to go in the water and don't know how to swim and can jump in at any time. So anyways, I mean, there's a lot going on there. I don't feel comfortable because of some of the things with people on the ground that I can speak to the specifics, if that makes sense. We are always at a worry that we're going to be turned away and not be able to see our kids anymore. And so I feel like I'm in a position where I kind of have to watch what I say, but we're talking that there are a lot of, I think that to some extent the directors and the staff do the best that they can, but they're burnt out. You know, they're doing this 24/7, essentially being a teacher. You know, you've got a teacher with 20 students or whatever, but you're doing it 24 hours a day. You don't get a break from it. And they're burnt, and it's showing. It's showing in short fuses, it's showing in a million different ways. And so yeah, I guess that's all I feel like I can say today, but yeah, so thank you again for being here and for listening and praying for change.
Leo and Wendy Van Asten.
Same thing.
You don't want that, you know.
No, don't touch him. Don't touch him. Don't touch him. Да нельзя его душить, Дауны. Его нельзя душить, сука. У него что это? Сознание теряет. И с него ебало, блядь.
Good morning. I'm Wendy Van Asten, and this is my husband, Leo Van Asten, and this video that was just shared is our prospective adoptive son, and his sister is with him. We refer to them affectionately as M&M. And this video is shared with his permission because he said, you can only share this if someone can help. I don't want to be popular on TikTok just because people, basically want to gawk at an incident. So we watched this video so many times, and it's, I mean, how do you sit here just wanting to go there and remove your children from harm's way, right? And so we're here today because we need help, right? We need someone to step up and help us, whether or not that's the Department of State or Biden or Joe Biden, please. This abuse isn't unique, it just happened to be caught on camera. And there are much worse things happening, as we are told, to other children displaced in EU countries. So use this with compassion. Do not spread this for a scandal. Spread this for ways that someone could help our children come home where they would be much safer. I think the organization today, we didn't really know which order we were going, and we had something prepared, and now I'm completely going off script. I did want to tell you, we're Wisconsin residents, and so we're asking Senator Ron Johnson, who we met with yesterday, to help us to connect with the Department of State on the initiatives. We're meeting with our representative, Mark Pocan, tomorrow morning. We're calling on him. If there's a representative here, please. This is our child, right? Our children, so they're in Sicily, as you can maybe tell from the Italian being spoken in this video. And our children are 15 and 16, but almost 16 and 17, and they don't have time. They don't have any more time to wait to be in a family. They've waited almost their entire lives. And Leo and I are in, Jenny shared a slide early in today's presentations of kind of the breakdown of where American families are at in the process. Leo and I are in the 15%. We're ready, right? Like we have our dossier accepted, and the adoption was almost to the point where we can move forward when the war broke out. So, and our kids are asking, why are we not home yet? And we need to tell them something, right? We want to leave this event in DC with some action. We can say, this is what's going to happen, and this is what we can do for you temporarily. And this is also, by the way, what our government is going to try to do with Ukraine to help families like us with children who don't have any more time to wait for the war to end. Because if martial law is still in place, in 1 year from now, this young man will never be able to come home as a legal child of ours. I'm sure he will be in our lives forever, as will his sister, but there's two tracks, right? There's this temporary track, what is happening during the war, and there's the second track of how can we help these stalled adoptions? Please, let's find a path. Let's talk reasonably with Ukraine, and we need our government to do that. So if you're here from the government, thank you for coming, because the other parents in the room, we know each other's stories. We all we don't need to hear this again. We feel like we have beat our heads against a wall for the last year talking about our stories, so we need you. So if you're here, thank you. We were supposed to talk a little bit about conditions. This is an obvious problem. Do you want to just hit some of the things that maybe others didn't?
As other people have talked about, there are situations on the ground, especially, at least with our kids in Italy, where adults are taking advantage of the situation and profiting from this. This incident, we have been told by the caregiver, was because the institution that they had been staying in was managed by one person, and another person wanted the federal funding to go from that organization to another organization, and so there was a forced move where not only was our son abused, but the children were taken against their will. The children were separated from their belongings for they didn't know how long. They left with nothing. The clothes on their back and the phones they were able to grab, they were left with that for at least 2 days before they got anything back, and it was over a week before they got all of their belongings back. So we can add to the obvious physical abuse, we can add psychological abuse, because all of the things that they brought along with them that they evacuated from Ukraine with are tied to us. They're tied to you. The things that your children brought out of Ukraine are tied to you. And being denied access to those things is psychological abuse. It's adding trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And so not only are these kids not able to deal with the trauma that they've already had, more is being heaped on. And the sick thing is it's for financial gain by the people that are supposed to be caring for them. Like has been said before, food insecurity runs rampant. We are in very close communication with the caregiver that's with our kids, who said that the Italians oh so graciously brought them food for Saturday and Sunday. There's 5 more days in the week, but they got food for 2 days. That's great. The food that they get is also inadequate. That was mentioned before from Italy. It's lunch program basically at best, and insufficient. These are growing children. That's been very difficult for all of them. They have been forced to assimilate into Italian culture, being forced to go to school in a school that they don't know the language. They're not given proper translation. Our son, who was very frustrated by this, asked, "Would you please give me something? I would love to learn how to do programming." They gave him an Italian language textbook and no support. And that was that. We are seeing, thankfully, in our kids' situation, at least that we know about, not anywhere near as bad as other people have talked about, but some grooming behaviors where adults are offering the kids money and gifts as a way to get them on their side and be like, "Oh, we're friendly, come with us." And luckily, our kids have remained with their group. We're very proud, we're very happy about that, and count our blessings every day, especially when we hear the other stories. The place that they were moved to, we were told was going to be a better situation for them, and it has not been. They've been offered access to a psychologist once, and it was a psychologist who didn't speak Russian, who didn't speak Ukrainian, and they asked one of the other kids in the group to translate. Because that's what we all want to do, is have another listening ear as we're talking about our own trauma, and these kids are just, "Oh yeah, that should be fine." Well, none of the kids did it because they didn't feel comfortable with that. But the Italians were able to check that box, like, well, we offered it. In their new situation as well, it's an institution that is set up to house 10 boys, 14 and under, or under 14. Currently, there were 6 boys already living there when our group of 10 showed up. So currently, one of those boys has since left, besides the point. There are now 16 people living in this facility, mixed genders between the ages of 8 and almost 17, plus 1 adult. There's not enough room for them. There wasn't enough room. They threw some bunk beds in to make room. The bathrooms don't have locks on the toilet stalls. The showers are separated by curtains only, but these are mixed genders. And the girls go to the bathroom and to the shower with a friend who stands guard to make sure that they're not so worried about their Ukrainian friends that are with them, but these other boys that are around who they don't know, who they can't speak with. 3 of them are Egyptian, 2 of them are Italian. They can kind of talk with the Italian boys, but that's that. Their caregiver has been an absolute saint through all of this, because she's the only one who seems to be fighting hard to keep these kids together and sticking with them and not allowing, doing her absolute best to not allow the Italians to have their way with the kids. She has had minimal to no support from the Ukrainian side and absolutely 0 support from the Italian side. We are in contact with her on a regular basis, and once we started learning about the needs that the kids have had, we have been partnering with other families with our kids to support them financially, including things like clothes. They evacuated in February. I don't know, Sicily gets pretty warm in the summertime. They didn't have warm clothes. We helped them get warm clothes. They walk everywhere. They wore out their shoes. We got them shoes. They didn't have medicine. We got them medicine, and we continue to try to meet these needs for these kids. So to echo Wendy's comments, anybody in our own government who can help us, these kids don't deserve this. They deserve to be here where we can put our arms around them gently, not like that. None of these kids deserve this. And I can't tell you how much I've seen this video and it still kills me every time.
hard to follow that up, but unfortunately, the next topic is very relevant. We'd like to invite Dr. Karen Sue Fellows to come up and talk about complex trauma. We've heard a lot about the physical conditions of these children and the deplorable living situation, but these children are plagued by many, many emotional and psychological problems as well. Karen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Karen Fellows. I have a PhD in clinical Christian counseling. I've been counseling for years, but more importantly, as you can see by my beautiful attire, I am the potential adoptive mother of 5 Ukrainian orphans. So I've been asked to speak a little bit today about what kind of emotional battles these children, our children, are facing. I'm going to try to be very plain and all-encompassing in my language and how I present this so that it is not overwhelmingly technical, and so that it is very clear to understand. So let's start at the beginning. Children that are placed in orphanages don't come from the best living situations, okay? That's pretty clear. They were put there for a reason. Regardless of how good an orphanage is, when a child's placed in an orphanage away from their biological parents, they end up experiencing the trauma of abandonment, okay? There's science to prove that trauma changes a person's brain neurochemistry, and with that said, these children will now experience these new struggles, things like difficulty processing emotions, anxiety, hyperactivity, difficulty making decisions, mental and physical delays. The list goes on, and that's just from being placed in care. The next thing we need to consider is what life in an orphanage looks like as far as environment goes. We've touched on that. Parents have told about their experiences and what that looks like from their perspective. Orphanage life is a life of constant change. Children come, children go. Caregivers come, caregivers go. Adults come, adults go. These children learn that nothing's permanent, okay? They believe that people leave them and never come back. This creates in the children an additional layer of trauma. They learn to not trust anyone to stay. They learn to not trust anyone to love them, to care about them, or to care for them. This is further compounded by abuses that generally happen in these settings. Even if you have a good orphanage, as we mentioned before, just the ratio of children to adults puts the children in a very vulnerable position. You could have the best intending adults, but then the children abuse each other, okay? Or you could have these adults, as some of these parents have spoken about, just get so overwhelmed that they end up lashing out and taking out their frustrations, their anger, their just that sense of being just completely overwhelmed. They'll take that out on those children. So, with that said, it's not unusual for orphans to be emotionally abused. And what does that look like? That looks like things like constantly shaming and berating these children. I know my children have been told that they're never going to be anything, they're not good enough. It's screaming and swearing at these kids. It's just that constant negative barrage. It's not unusual for orphans to be physically abused. This means things like being beaten, tied to beds, pulled by the hair. My little Max here, I was told that he would be beaten with a chair to punish him for his intense hyperactivity. That's the reality of an orphanage situation. All right. It is also not unusual for these children to be sexually abused, and that will be both from adults and children that will perform these kind of things. Okay, this is not unusual. So now we have children who have abandonment issues and the psychological impact of that, trust issues, permanence issues, physical and emotional trauma from abuse, and we're not even done. That's just the start of it. That's just the tip of the iceberg, okay? So orphans often suffer from neglect. Again, this is made worse by this unbalanced child to adult ratio. And generally speaking, orphanages don't have enough food or supplies to supply for all of these children. Even if they do have enough food and supplies, a lot of times food is used as a punishment against these children. They will have it taken away from them when they do something wrong. And something wrong is not going to be as drastic as we would think something wrong is. They might talk back and end up losing their meal. Okay, it is not what you think of when you think of what would deserve a punishment of no meal. All right. So then you have the other part of that, where even if they are provided with their food, oftentimes the stronger kids will beat up the weaker kids and take their food. When Maxim stayed with us, he would hide food. All right, and so that is another one of those things that these children do, and the things that happen to them from this trauma. We end up with children with severe cases of malnourishment, and also the food-related trauma, which causes them to hoard food and also to steal food. It's kind of one of these things where they did it to me, and I need food, so I'm going to do it to you. All right, and that cycle continues happening just because they just need to eat. And again, we've touched on the lack of medicine, the lack of that sort of supply as well. And so if we're talking about these children that have these medical needs and they have these medicines that could help them with their needs, they're not being supplied with those medicines. They can barely get a Tylenol if they have headaches, or for the girls, if they have menstrual cramps, they're not going to be given medicine for that. So, continuing on, again, these layers are really adding up at this point, right? But it's at this point in their lives when most of these children started connecting with American families. All of these families that were hosting kids had been through training to teach us how to deal with these children and their emotional and mental needs. I don't know about all the hosting organizations, but our binder was about this thick with all the different things that we needed to cover and we needed to understand when it came to the trauma and the situations that these children had dealt with. So these parents had all been through these type of trainings. So with that said, these children came into our homes, they started getting connected. These parents loved and wanted these children, and these children knew it. And so they started getting exactly what every orphan wants. Every orphan wants a family.